The sky over Atlanta was a bruised shade of violet when Malik Carter spotted her. A little girl in a pale yellow dress, standing alone on the corner of Jefferson Street with tears streaking down her cheeks. Cars roared past in the evening rush, horns blaring, engines growling, but she didn't move. She just stood there, clutching a small stuffed rabbit like it was the only safe thing left in the world. Malik, barely 10 years old, slowed his steps. His backpack, patched and faded, felt heavier than usual after a long day at school. He'd been taught to keep his head down, to mind his own business, especially in neighborhoods like this, where people didn't always trust kids who looked like him. But something about her, the way her lower lip trembled, the lost panic in her eyes, pulled at something deeper inside him. "Hey," he called softly, careful not to scare her. "You okay?" She sniffled and shook her head. "I can't find my daddy." The words hit him like a punch. Malik looked around. No adults, no police, no one paying attention. Just a scared little girl swallowed by a city that didn't care. "It's gonna be all right," he said, crouching to meet her gaze. "I'll help you get home." He didn't know where home was or how far it might be. He didn't know if anyone would even thank him. But he reached out his hand anyway. She hesitated, then took it. And that's how it started, with one small act of kindness on a cracked city sidewalk. What Malik didn't know was that this simple decision would soon put his name in headlines, shake the lives of influential people, and change his future forever. But this was only the beginning. The city lights hummed faintly above them as Malik Carter led the little girl down cracked sidewalks and through the uneven rhythm of Atlanta's West End. Street lamps flickered like tired stars. Graffiti-stained walls whispered stories of people trying to survive, and the smell of fried chicken and exhaust mingled in the cool evening air. Malik walked carefully, holding the girl's small hand in his, every step heavier with the weight of responsibility he didn't quite understand. "My name's Malik," he said gently, glancing down at her. "What's yours?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Emma." "Okay, Emma, do you remember your address?" She shook her head. "I was with my nanny. We were at the park. And then I turned around and she was gone." Malik's heart ached. She looked about 6 years old, maybe 7, too young to be wandering the streets alone. And her dress, soft yellow with tiny embroidered flowers, was the kind of thing he'd only seen in store windows his family couldn't afford. The stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her arms looked new, too. Not the kind of toy bought from the dollar store on the corner. "Don't worry," Malik said, forcing a reassuring smile. "We'll figure it out." Malik was 10, but he'd grown up faster than most kids his age. His mother, Tanya Carter, worked double shifts as a nurse's aide, leaving the house before dawn and returning after dark. His father, Marcus, had left when Malik was 3, a ghost he'd long stopped waiting for. Life was hard, but Tanya's love was fierce and relentless. "Keep your head up," she always told him. "Work hard. Treat people right, even when they don't treat you the same. That's how we rise." Malik carried those words like armor. He was small for his age, but quick-witted and sharp-eyed, with a heart that refused to turn cold despite the things he saw around him. Most afternoons, he'd finish homework at the community center before walking home alone through the maze of city streets, careful to avoid corners where trouble liked to hide. But tonight, his routine was gone. Tonight, he was someone's protector. "Where have you been?" Tanya asked when Malik walked in nearly an hour later than usual, Emma still gripping his hand. The small apartment smelled faintly of beans and cornbread, dinner stretched thin but full of love. "This is Emma," Malik said, slightly out of breath. "She's lost. I found her by the park." Tanya's expression softened as she knelt beside the girl. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you okay?" Emma nodded nervously. "I want my daddy." "Do you know his name?" Tanya asked. "Mr. Lawson," Emma whispered. "He's working." "He's always working." Tanya exchanged a glance with her son. "We'll call the police," she said gently. "They can help find him." But when Malik heard that, his stomach tightened. He'd seen how police treated kids like him, How they'd roll their eyes, assume the worst, look for reasons to blame. He didn't trust them. "Can we try something else first?" he asked. "Maybe walk around near the park again? Maybe someone's looking for her." Tanya hesitated. Then she sighed. "Okay, but if we don't find anyone in an hour, we're calling 911. For the next hour, Malik and Tanya walked the streets near Ashwood Park, Emma clinging tightly to Malik's side. They stopped passers-by, checked nearby stores, and even asked a few street vendors if they'd seen a frantic adult searching for a girl. Nothing. But as they rounded a corner by a coffee shop, Malik noticed a man, tall, broad-shouldered, suit jacket rumpled, speaking frantically into a phone. His voice was sharp, desperate. "Yes, I've called the police." "No, I don't care how much it costs. Find her." "Emma?" Malik asked softly. The little girl gasped. "Daddy!" She tore from his side and ran toward the man, who spun around at the sound of her voice. He dropped to his knees as she collided with his chest. "Emma!" "Oh, my God!" He choked, holding her tight. "I thought I lost you." Tanya placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "We did it," she whispered. But something about the man's suit, the expensive watch, the polished shoes, made Malik's chest tighten. This wasn't just a dad. This was somebody. "Thank you," the man said moments later, standing and looking at Malik with teary eyes. "You have no idea what you've done for me." "It's okay," Malik mumbled, embarrassed by the attention. "I'm Daniel Lawson," he said, extending a hand. "Emma's father." Malik shook it shyly. Daniel studied him, the worn sneakers, the too small jacket, the proud but cautious eyes. Something about the boy struck him deeply. Most people would have walked past a crying child on a busy street. This boy hadn't. "Do you live nearby?" Daniel asked. "Yes, sir," Malik replied. "Down on Fulton Avenue." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'd like to thank you properly. Can you and your mother join us for dinner tomorrow night?" Malik hesitated. "I don't know." "Please," Daniel insisted. "It would mean a lot." Tanya, caught off guard, agreed before Malik could protest. "We'd be honored." The next evening, Malik wore his best clothes, a hand-me-down button-up and slightly scuffed dress shoes, as he and Tanya arrived at a sprawling glass and steel mansion in the city's wealthiest neighborhood. It felt like stepping into another universe. Marble floors, chandelier light like falling stars. Art pieces are worth more than the entire contents of their apartment. Malik's breath caught in his chest. "Welcome," Daniel said warmly, ushering them in. Emma bounded into the room and wrapped her arms around Malik. "You came!" she squealed. "I promised, didn't I?" Malik smiled. Dinner was surreal. Chefs served dishes that Malik couldn't pronounce. The table stretched longer than their entire kitchen. But beneath the elegance, Tanya felt tension. Glances from staff, polite but distant smiles from Daniel's associates who stopped by mid-meal. They weren't used to people like them sitting at that table. After dinner, Daniel invited Malik and Tanya into his study, a room lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "I haven't been entirely honest with you," he said, clasping his hands. "I'm the CEO of Lawson Holdings. We build infrastructure across the U.S. and abroad. Some call me one of the wealthiest men in America." Tanya's eyes widened. Malik's mouth went dry. "I don't say that to impress you," Daniel continued. "I say it because I want you to understand something. All my wealth, all my success, means nothing if I can't teach my daughter kindness. And she learned it from you." Malik swallowed hard. "I didn't do anything special." Daniel smiled. "That's where you're wrong. You did something most adults wouldn't have." Just as the evening was drawing to a close, a man in a gray suit entered the study without knocking. His name was Charles Wentworth, Daniel's head of security, and his expression was ice cold. "Sir," he said, eyeing Malik and Tanya with suspicion, "I strongly advise against inviting outsiders into the residence without proper vetting." "Outsiders?" Tanya repeated, her voice stiffening. "No offense meant," Charles lied. "It's just people from different backgrounds sometimes misunderstand things." The room fell silent. Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's enough, Charles," he said sharply. "You're dismissed." But Malik caught the look in Charles's eyes, and for the first time, he felt the weight of a divide far bigger than money. In the weeks that followed, Malik and Emma became inseparable. She invited him to her school's science fair. He taught her how to shoot hoops at the community center. Their friendship blossomed, a bond built not on wealth or status, but on trust. Yet whispers followed them. At Emma's private academy, parents exchanged disapproving glances. At Malik's school, classmates teased him for acting rich. Even Tanya noticed how people treated her differently when they learned about her connection to the Lawsons. "People fear what they don't understand," she told Malik one night. "Don't let it change who you are." One morning, Malik opened his school locker to find a newspaper stuffed inside. The headline made his stomach twist. "Billionaire's daughter befriends boy from the projects. Charity or publicity stunt." The article speculated on Malik's motives and painted his family as opportunists. At lunch, kids whispered behind his back. Teachers gave him pitying looks. He wanted to scream. To tell them he never asked for any of this. But deep down, another question gnawed at him. Was Emma's dad helping them because he cared? Or because it made a good story? A week later, Daniel asked Tanya to meet him privately. "I want to offer Malik a full scholarship," he said. "Private schooling, mentorship, everything he needs to succeed." Tanya's heart raced. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, but also a risk. Would Malik be accepted? Would he lose himself in a world that looked down on where he came from? "I need to think about it," she said quietly, and think she did. Because this wasn't just a choice about education. It was a choice about identity. Despite the tension, Malik and Emma's friendship continued to grow. They shared secrets, dreams, and fears. Emma confessed she hated how her father was never home. Malik admitted he sometimes wished his dad would come back. They were just two kids, from two very different worlds, trying to make sense of it all. But those worlds were about to collide harder than either of them imagined. Because beneath Daniel's polished exterior, there were secrets, and someone was determined to expose them. And Malik, unknowingly, was walking straight into the crossfire. The boy who'd simply wanted to help a lost girl was about to become the center of a storm that would shake the city's wealthiest family to its core. The weeks that followed should have been perfect. Two children from different worlds forming an unlikely friendship. Two families slowly bridging a gap built by centuries of difference. But life, Malik was beginning to understand, didn't work like fairy tales. It was more complicated, more fragile, and sometimes it turned on moments you never saw coming. At first, everything seemed almost magical. Malik and Emma became fixtures in each other's lives. She visited his neighborhood often, laughing as they raced through cracked sidewalks and played basketball under rusted hoops. He, in turn, spent weekends at her mansion, exploring hallways that seemed to stretch forever, marveling at things like indoor movie theaters and elevators inside homes. Yet, beneath the surface, tension brewed. It started with whispers. At Emma's birthday party, one of the mothers leaned close to another and murmured, "How generous of the Lawsons, giving that poor boy a chance." At Malik's school, a teacher praised him for associating with people who could be good influences. Malik heard every word, and each one chipped away at something inside him. One afternoon, as they sat beneath an oak tree near Emma's backyard pond, Malik stared at the clouds reflected in the water. He said, "Do you ever feel like people don't think we're supposed to be friends?" Emma frowned. "What do you mean? Like they think I don't belong here?" She was quiet for a moment. "Well, then they're stupid," she said finally. "You do belong here. You're my best friend." Malik smiled faintly, but the thought stayed with him, a shadow behind every laugh, every shared secret. Then came the scholarship letter. Daniel handed it to Tanya personally one evening, his tone kind but insistent. "Malik is a remarkable boy," he said. "I want him to have every opportunity, the kind I never had." Tanya read the offer, a full scholarship to St. Augustine Academy, one of the most prestigious schools in the country. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of for her son, but something in the wording unsettled her. For students from underprivileged backgrounds, it was meant to be generous. Instead, it felt like a label. "I'll think about it," she said again. That night, she stared at the paper long after Malik had gone to bed. Was she about to lift her son into a brighter future? Or was she about to throw him into a world that would try to change who he was? Meanwhile, Daniel Lawson was fighting battles of his own, ones far beyond the reach of public charity events and polished press conferences. Behind the glossy image of Lawson Holdings, cracks were forming. A government investigation had quietly begun into one of his subsidiary companies over alleged labor violations. Anonymous sources were leaking information to the press, and an activist group was planning a protest outside his headquarters. "Sir," Charles, his head of security, said grimly one morning, "we're hearing chatter. Someone's planning to dig into your past. And they're going to use Emma and her friendship with Malik to make you look bad." Daniel's stomach twisted. "How?" "They're calling it the billionaire and the poor boy, accusing you of using Malik as a publicity stunt to cover up corporate misconduct." Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "He's a child. My daughter's friend," Charles shrugged. "That doesn't matter to them. They see weakness, and they'll use it." A week later it happened. A major news outlet ran an expose with the headline, "Lawson's PR Gamble, Friendship or Facade." The article portrayed Malik as a pawn, a photo op for Daniel's rebranding campaign. It even published a photo of Malik and Emma playing basketball, snapped by a paparazzo through a chain-link fence. At school, whispers turned to outright sneers. "Hey, charity case!" someone shouted in the hallway. "What's it like being a billionaire's project?" Malik clenched his fists and walked away, but the words sank deep. That night he threw the scholarship letter into the trash. "I don't want their help," he muttered. "I don't want anything from them." The next time he saw Emma, their conversation was strained. "Why didn't you call me back?" she asked softly. Malik shrugged. "Been busy?" "That's not true," she whispered. "You're mad at me." "I'm not mad at you," he said, his voice tight. "I'm mad that people think I'm only your friend because your dad is rich. I'm mad that they look at me like I'm nothing." Emma's eyes welled with tears. "You're not nothing." But the damage was done. Malik started pulling away, skipping their usual weekend plans and ignoring her texts. He still cared. But it hurt too much to stand beside her and feel invisible. By early spring, tension around Lawson Holdings had reached a boiling point. Protesters gathered outside the company's downtown tower, holding signs reading "Exploiters of the Poor" and "No Justice, No Contracts." Daniel watched from his office window as chants echoed through the streets. Cameras swarmed. Reporters demanded statements. "This is spiraling," Charles warned. "We need a distraction." Daniel shook his head. "No distractions, no lies. If we're going to survive this, it'll be with the truth." But the truth, he knew, could be devastating. One evening, Daniel invited Tanya and Malik to the mansion for dinner, something he hadn't done in weeks. Malik almost didn't go, but Tanya insisted. "We owe them a conversation," she said, not silence. After the meal, Daniel asked to speak to Malik alone in his study. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice heavier than Malik had ever heard it. "My company hasn't always done the right thing. Years ago, I made decisions that hurt people. I told myself it was just business, but deep down I knew better." Malik stared at him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want you to think I'm helping you out of guilt," Daniel said. "I'm helping you because you remind me of who I wish I'd been when I was younger. Brave enough to do the right thing when no one else would." Malik didn't know how to respond. Part of him still felt betrayed, but another part, the part that remembered Emma's laughter and Daniel's kindness, wondered if people could change. Days later, a letter arrived at Malik's apartment. No return address. Inside was a photo of him and Emma walking home from the park, with a note scrawled in red ink. "Stay away from the Lawsons if you know what's good for you." Tanya's hands shook as she read it. "We're going to the police." "No," Malik said firmly. "If we do, they'll just think we're trying to get attention. We'll handle this our way." But he didn't know what "our way" meant, not yet. All he knew was that someone was watching them, and that this was no longer just about friendship. If the world wanted to paint their friendship as fake, Malik decided, then they'd show them the truth. He reached out to Emma with a plan. They would organize a community event, together, to support families affected by corporate negligence. No press releases, no corporate logos, just two kids trying to make a difference. "I love it," Emma said, eyes bright. "Let's do it." At first it was small, a donation drive, a free tutoring program, a few volunteers. But word spread. Soon, hundreds of people signed up to help. Local businesses offered supplies. Even skeptical reporters started asking questions. And for the first time, the narrative began to change. It wasn't about wealth and charity anymore. It was about unity, but not everyone was happy. One night, as Malik and Emma were setting up tables for an event at the community center, a man approached them, the same man who had written the threatening note. "Stay away from Lawson," he growled. "This is your last warning." Before Malik could react, the man shoved him to the ground and disappeared into the night. Emma screamed for help. Malik stood, bruised but defiant. "We're not stopping," he said, voice trembling but strong. "Not now." The next morning, Daniel arrived at Malik's apartment. "I heard what happened," he said, visibly shaken. "I'm hiring security for both of you," Malik shook his head. "We don't need bodyguards. We need people to understand. We're trying to do something good." Daniel looked at the boy, this kid from the wrong side of the tracks who had risked everything to help his daughter, and felt a swell of pride and guilt all at once. "You're right," he said, "and I'm going to stand beside you this time." The next event drew more than 1,000 people. Protesters and corporate employees stood side by side. Former rivals shook hands. Cameras rolled, but this time the story wasn't about exploitation. It was about two children who refused to let the world define them, and in that moment, something shifted. The city began to see Malik not as a charity case, but as a leader. They saw Emma not as the billionaire's daughter, but as a friend. And for Daniel Lawson, it was the first step toward redemption. But as powerful as that moment was, the storm wasn't over. Because someone, somewhere, still wanted to tear it all down. And the final confrontation would reveal a truth none of them were prepared for. The real battle was only beginning. The spring air in Atlanta carried a strange weight that morning, heavy, charged, like the city itself was waiting for something to break. On the steps of City Hall, hundreds of people had gathered. Signs raised high, cameras rolling, chants echoing through the concrete canyons of downtown. This was supposed to be the biggest day yet for Malik and Emma's movement, a rally to demand accountability from Lawson Holdings and raise support for underprivileged communities. It had started as a small idea between two children. Now it was a story that gripped the city, but behind the cheers and chants, danger lurked. Malik could feel it in his chest, a quiet warning beating beneath the excitement. "Are you ready?" Emma asked, standing beside him on the small wooden stage they'd built together. Malik nodded, adjusting the microphone with shaky hands. "Yeah," he said. "Let's show them who we really are." The crowd roared as he stepped forward. He looked out over the sea of faces, young, old, black, white, rich, poor, all united by something bigger than themselves. "My name is Malik Carter," he began, voice trembling at first but growing stronger. "And I'm here because I believe no one should be treated like they're less. Not because of where they're from, not because of the color of their skin, and not because they don't have money." Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Malik took a deep breath. "I didn't plan any of this. All I did was help someone who needed help. That's it. But it taught me something important. Kindness is power. And it's stronger than hate, stronger than fear, stronger than all the walls they build to keep us apart." The cheers swelled even louder, shaking the air. Emma squeezed his hand, smiling. "You did it," she whispered. But just as Malik was about to hand her the microphone, chaos erupted. A sharp crack split the air. Not a gunshot, but the sudden, violent pop of a speaker exploding. Sparks rained from the stage lights. People screamed and ducked for cover. Security rushed forward, shouting into radios, "Get them off the stage!" Someone yelled. Malik's heart pounded. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted to stop them. As he and Emma were rushed behind a barricade, Charles, Daniel's head of security, ran up, face pale. "We have a problem," he said. "Someone planted a small device under the stage wiring. It could have caused a fire." "Who would do that?" Emma cried. Charles hesitated. "We think it's tied to the same group that sent you those threats." Daniel's face hardened as he joined them. "They're here. I knew they'd try something." Before Malik could ask what he meant, a familiar voice boomed through a loudspeaker across the plaza. "Daniel Lawson, you think you can fool this city with speeches and charity?" Malik turned. A man stood on the steps opposite the stage, flanked by a few masked protesters. His voice dripped with fury. "You ruined lives with your greed. You bled communities dry, and now you're hiding behind a boy and your daughter to make yourself look clean." Cameras swiveled. Reporters surged forward. The crowd grew restless. "Who is that?" Malik asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. "His name is Darius Cole. He used to work for one of my companies. Years ago, I shut down a plant after a deal went bad. He lost his job, and his son got sick from the pollution we left behind." Malik stared at him. "You did hurt people?" Daniel's voice broke. "I did, and I've spent every day trying to make it right. But Darius, he wants revenge." Darius raised a file high above his head. "You want truth? Here it is. Proof that Lawson Holdings paid off inspectors to ignore safety violations. Proof that they cut corners while people suffered." The crowd gasped. Reporters shouted questions, and in that moment, the rally turned from celebration to confrontation. "Let him speak," Malik said suddenly. Daniel blinked. "What? If you shut him down, they'll believe every word he says." "Let him talk, and then you talk," Daniel hesitated. Then he nodded. Darius stepped forward, voice trembling with rage as he told his story, about losing his home, his job, his son's health, about watching powerful men walk away without consequences, about the hypocrisy of a billionaire preaching justice while hiding from his sins. When he was done, silence blanketed the plaza. All eyes turned to Daniel. He stepped to the microphone slowly. "Everything he said is true," he began. "I did those things. I believe profit mattered more than people, and I will regret that for the rest of my life." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "But here's the other truth," Daniel continued. "That boy right there, Malik Carter, reminded me of the man I should have been. He showed me what it means to do the right thing, even when no one's watching. I can't change the past, but I can fight like hell to build a different future. And I'm starting by reopening the fund for families we hurt, with my own money." The crowd erupted, some cheering, some skeptical, some stunned. And then, to everyone's surprise, Darius spoke again. "If you're serious," he said slowly, "then meet with us, not as a billionaire talking down to victims, but as a man willing to make amends." Daniel stepped forward and extended his hand. "I will." The two men shook hands as cameras clicked furiously. The image, once enemies, now facing the future together, flashed across screens worldwide within minutes. But the drama wasn't over. As the rally began to calm, Charles approached Malik, his voice urgent. "We found the guy who planted the device. He's part of a radical group, and he wasn't acting alone." "What does that mean?" Malik asked. "It means they were planning something bigger. And if we don't clear the plaza now, we could all be in danger." Before Malik could react, a commotion broke out near the back of the crowd. A man in a heavy coat was pushing through people, shouting incoherently. Police tackled him to the ground, and from his pocket, they pulled a crude incendiary device, one that could have caused mass panic. The crowd screamed. Parents clutched children. Sirens wailed. And then something unexpected happened. Malik stepped forward, past the barricades, past the reporters, past the police, and grabbed the microphone one last time. "Listen to me," he shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. "This isn't how we fix anything. This isn't how we make things right. Hurting people doesn't solve pain. It just spreads it. If we want change, we have to be the change, and together." The plaza fell silent. Slowly, people stopped running. The fear ebbed, replaced by something heavier. Hope. Emma rushed forward and wrapped her arms around him. "You were amazing," she whispered. Daniel joined them, pride glistening in his eyes. "I've been in boardrooms with world leaders," he said, "but I've never seen courage like yours." By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, everything had changed. The news would call it the Day of Reckoning. The day a billionaire admitted his sins, a grieving father found a path to healing, and a 10-year-old boy reminded an entire city what justice really looked like. But for Malik, none of that mattered. All he cared about was Emma's hand in his, the crowd's quiet cheers, and the knowledge that, for the first time, people weren't looking at him like a project or a pawn. They were looking at him like a leader. And deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. The days that followed the rally felt different, not just for Malik, but for the entire city. Something had shifted in the air, as if a storm had passed, leaving a clearer sky behind. The headlines told the story in bold, breathless fonts. Billionaire admits corporate wrongs, commits millions to reparations. 10-year-old inspires a city to confront its conscience. From lost girl to national movement. Friendship sparks change. Across Atlanta, and soon across the country, people were talking. The rally video had gone viral, shared by millions. Malik's speech, raw and powerful, was replayed on national news channels. And while critics still argued, something undeniable had happened. A conversation had begun. Within weeks, Daniel Lawson followed through on every promise. A $200 million compensation fund was created for the families affected by Lawson Holdings' past negligence. New regulations were implemented in his companies to ensure transparency and fair labor practices. And for the first time in decades, he agreed to testify before Congress about corporate responsibility. But for Daniel, the most significant change wasn't in boardrooms or bank accounts. It was in his heart. He started showing up to Emma's soccer games. He began volunteering for community initiatives inspired by Malik, and slowly, the man once known only as a ruthless businessman started to be seen as something more, a human being trying to make amends. Life for Malik changed too, but in ways that mattered more than fame or headlines. Strangers stopped him on the street to thank him. His school organized an assembly in his honor. Even the classmates who once mocked him now looked at him with respect, and maybe a little envy. But Malik stayed grounded. "I'm just a kid who tried to help," he told reporters again and again. And he meant it. One afternoon, he and Emma sat under their favorite oak tree again, watching the clouds drift by like they had months before. But this time, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. "Do you think everything's better now?" Emma asked. Malik smiled. "Not yet," he said. "But it's better than it was yesterday." The movement they'd started didn't end with them. Community centers opened new programs for kids in struggling neighborhoods. Corporations pledged reforms. And thousands of people, inspired by one boy's act of kindness, began asking themselves what they could do to make the world fairer. And for Malik and Emma, life continued. Not as a billionaire's daughter and a boy from the projects, but as two friends who had changed each other's worlds forever. Because in the end, a small hand extended on a lonely sidewalk had set off a chain of events that neither of them could have imagined, and proved that even the smallest act of kindness can echo louder than hate. In the end, it wasn't about wealth or headlines. It wasn't even about righting old wrongs. It was about a single choice. One small act of compassion on a cold city street that rippled outward and changed lives. Malik Carter didn't set out to change the world. He wasn't trying to make a statement about race, class, or justice. All he did was see a scared little girl and decide to help. But that decision, that simple human choice, became something much bigger. It exposed truths long buried, bridged divides that seemed impossible, and reminded an entire city that kindness isn't weakness, it's power. And maybe that's the lesson hidden inside this story. We live in a world that tries to convince us that our differences define us, that money makes one person more valuable than another, or that the color of your skin decides how far you'll go. But stories like Malik's prove something far more important. Our humanity connects us more profoundly than any label ever could. It also asks us a difficult question. What would we have done? Would we have walked past a crying child telling ourselves it wasn't our problem? Or would we have stopped, even for a moment, and offered a helping hand? Because sometimes the greatest revolutions don't start with anger or revenge. They begin with kindness, with courage, with the belief that doing the right thing, no matter how small, still matters. So now it's your turn. If you were in Malik's shoes, what would you have done? Share your thoughts below, because the conversation that starts here might be the one that changes everything.